Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Parenting Lab. So, a few weeks ago, I was talking with some clients about changes they wanted to make in their family. Now, these weren't huge dramatic changes. It wasn't causing a lot of conflict, and it wasn't like about them being unwilling to work with each other. It was much more ordinary than that, and probably really familiar to you because I know it was really familiar to me. I've been in this situation countless times in the years that I've been married. What was happening was that they just weren't always agreeing on what was important or what to prioritize in their family as they were trying to implement the things that they were learning in the coaching process. So, one of them would want to introduce a new routine or change the way they handled something with the kids or put more energy toward one particular goal. And the other person maybe understood the idea, but didn't necessarily feel the same urgency around it. And that made it difficult for them to move forward in any of the ideas that were coming up. And I feel like that situation is one that a lot of us experience in our partnerships because sometimes we do want different things. So, how do we get better at buying into the things that matter to our partner? Not just agreeing with them, not reluctantly going along with them, and not saying we're going to do things that we don't intend to do, but actually understanding why something matters to your partner and then becoming invested enough in that thing to help make it happen. So, to get there, we're going to revisit the head, heart, and hands framework. If you've been listening to me for a while, you've heard me teach it before as a way to understand how we communicate and connect and move through our relationships. But in this conversation, head, heart, and hands also gives us a really practical way to create the buy in that we're looking for. So, I want to turn it into a really easy exercise that you can actually sit down and do with your partner that can help with a few different things. First, you'll be able to stop trying to convince each other of your point. Okay, you can understand each other better, what matters to you, what matters to them. And then you can actually build a family where one person's goals don't have to come at the expense of anyone else's. Okay? And just as a side note here, this process does work in other relationships too. It's not just partnerships. It works with kids and it can work professionally if it's tweaked a little bit. So even if you don't do this exactly like I'm going to outline it for you, the underlying principle is the same. So just keep that in mind as we learn together today. All right, so if you haven't heard of the head, heart, and hands, or if you need a quick review, essentially there are three core perspectives that make up our worldview and affect how we are able to show up in our relationships. I call these doorways to connection. So the first doorway is the head. It's our thoughts, our logic, how we solve problems, and how we understand things. The second doorway is the heart, our feelings, our emotions, its vulnerability, and our need to be seen and safe. And the third doorway then is the hands. This is action, what we actually do. It's the tangible behavior and follow through of the things we think and say. All of these doorways are essential, and we each have access to all of them. But we do tend to have a default doorway, and that's the one we go to first, or the space that we spend the most time in. It's the one that feels the most comfortable to us. So as we go through this, I want you just to consider which one of those areas you tend to go to first. Okay? So, a lot of times when we want our partner to get on board with an idea that we have, most of us start with the head. We explain our reasoning. We give examples. We tell them why this idea makes sense and why we believe it would be good for our family. And when they still seem hesitant or don't seem to understand, we explain it again. Just sometimes with a little more intensity, okay? We think that if we can just help them understand it, they'll agree with us. But understanding an idea isn't the same as caring about it. And caring about it isn't the same as being willing or able to help carry it out. Real buy in needs all three. The head needs to understand it, the heart needs to find meaning in it, and the hands need to know what they're willing to actually do. But before I walk you through the exercise, let's just talk for a second about what it actually means to buy in. Because buy in isn't the same as agreement. Agreement means we both think this is the right idea. We see the situation the same way, we want the same outcome, and would probably make the same choice on our own. But buy in is different. Buy in says, I may not feel as strongly about this as you do, and it may not be the choice I would have made, but I understand why it matters to you, and so I'm willing to help make space for it. That distinction matters because we're not always going to with our partner. We are two different people with different histories and priorities and personalities, ways of looking at the world. And even when we share the same values, we may have completely different ideas about how those values look and play out in our family. One person might value connection and want more unstructured family time. The other might also value connection and believe that predictable routines help everyone feel calmer and more available to each other. One person might want to save more money because financial security helps them feel safe, but the other might want to spend money on experiences because making memories feels really important to them. All right. These are really common things that come up in partnerships, and neither person is necessarily wrong or right. A lot of times they're just reaching for the same thing, but through very different approaches or doorways. When we're focused on getting our partner to agree with us, we tend to defend our position instead of getting curious about theirs. We start gathering evidence. We explain all the reasons that our idea would work. We point out the problems with the way things are now. And without realizing it, the conversation becomes less about understanding each other and more about deciding whose idea is best or deserves to win. Head, heart, and hands gives us a different way into that conversation. So the head asks, what about this makes sense? The heart asks, why does this feel important? And the hands ask, what am I willing to do? And we need all three because understanding alone doesn't create commitment. I can see why your idea is logical and still feel no connection to it. I can care about what you want and still not understand what you're asking me to do. And I can reluctantly do what you've asked me to do while still feeling resentful because I never really understood the meaning behind it. Okay, real buy in happens when I can understand your goal, I can connect with why it matters, and I can choose a part that I am honestly willing to carry. And that is exactly what this exercise is designed to help us do. So here's how it works. Each person is going to start with a piece of paper. At the top, write down one thing that you would like your partner to buy into. It might be a new routine you want to create, or a change in the way that you handle discipline, maybe a goal for your finances, or a different approach to screen time. Then, once you have your goal written down, I want you to just draw 3 simple pictures. You can even write the words if you don't want to draw it. It doesn't have to be good. It's not an art project, but I want you to draw the 3 pictures: a little head, a little heart, a little hand. Okay? It's just a visual way so that you can move through each part of this framework. All right. Now, first, you're going to do this with your own goal. Ideally, you're both presenting something for the other person to consider, but it would also work if only one thing is on the table. Okay. So then you're going to start with the head. Ask yourself, what about this idea makes sense to me? This is where you name the practical reasons behind the change. What problem does it solve? What will it make easier? What have you noticed that led you to think this would be helpful? Okay, so write down your answers and then move on to the heart. Ask yourself, what about this feels right or good or important to me? Okay, write that down. Now, this question goes underneath the logic. Maybe the new routine isn't only about getting everyone out the door on time. Maybe it's about wanting your mornings to feel less frantic or chaotic. Maybe changing the way you discipline isn't just about finding better strategies. Maybe it's more about you wanting your child to experience something different than what you experienced. This is often the part our partners can't see. They hear what we want to change, but they don't always know what that change really represents to us underneath. Okay, so finally, we move to the hands. Ask yourself, what am I willing to do or even sacrifice to make this happen? This is where the idea becomes more than something you want your partner to implement. What responsibility are you willing to take? What habit will you change? What time or convenience or comfort or preference are you willing to give up? Okay, so be specific here. I'll try harder isn't a hands commitment. I'll support your decision isn't a hands commitment. All right, that still puts responsibility on the other person. Really think about what you're willing to do. I'll put my phone away during bedtime. I'll do the dishes while you get the kids dressed for school. I'll make the date night plans once a month, or I'll sit down every Sunday and we can look at our budget. All right. Something that gives the goal somewhere to begin, but it also gives you something to be accountable for. Now, when you've finished, you now have a map of your own buy in. You've named why the goal makes sense, why it matters to you, and what you are personally willing to contribute to making that goal happen. And your partner, in theory, has done the same thing with the thing that matters to them. Now, this is the fun part. You switch papers. Now you're looking at the goal your partner wrote down. And your job isn't to decide whether it's the best goal. You're not looking for holes in their reasoning or counter arguing their points. You're really trying to understand the goal from where you stand and find the places where you can genuinely connect with it. So we start with the head. And you ask yourself, what about my partner's goal makes sense to me? You may not agree with every part of their idea, but there's probably something that you can understand. Maybe you can see the problem they're trying to solve, or you can recognize how that change might help your family. Maybe you wouldn't approach it in the same way, but you can acknowledge that their reasoning is valid. You don't have to pretend to agree. You're just looking for the part that makes sense to you. Then you move to the heart. Ask, what about this goal feels good or meaningful or important to me? Now, this might require you to look beyond the goal itself and again consider what it represents. Maybe you don't care very much about creating a detailed family budget, but you do care that your partner feels less anxious about money. Maybe you're not personally bothered by the chaos of the mornings, but you do care that your partner starts the day feeling overwhelmed. Sometimes the place where we find buy-in isn't in the idea itself, it's in the person that's asking for it. I may not care about this the same way that you do, but I do care about you. I care about how this is affecting you, and I care about the kind of family that we are trying to create together. That emotional connection turns that goal from your thing into something that has meaning for both of you. Then we move to the hands. Ask yourself, what am I honestly willing to do to help this become a reality? Now, the word honestly is so important here. Okay, you're not promising whatever you think your partner wants to hear, and you're not committing to something you already know you're going to resent or that you won't be able to sustain. You are identifying one concrete way that you are willing to support what matters to them. Maybe you're willing to try the new routine, but only 3 nights a week. Maybe you'll take responsibility for just one part of the process. Maybe you're willing to read the article they've been trying to discuss with you, or go to the appointment, or protect some time for a weekly conversation. It doesn't have to be a huge sacrifice. It just needs to be real, a real commitment. Now, once you've both finished, switch the papers back and talk through what you've written. And this is where the magic happens. You get to see what your partner understood about your goal. You get to hear which part reached their heart. And instead of wondering whether you'll have to carry the whole thing alone, now you know what they're willing to contribute. You might also discover that some part of the goal needs to change. Maybe your partner found meaning in one part of it, but has a legitimate concern about another part of it. Or maybe the commitment they can realistically make is smaller than what you had hoped for. Maybe both goals can coexist, but the plan needs to make room for both of them. Now, this isn't the exercise failing. This is that conversation becoming really honest. Okay, the goal isn't to leave with two people completely agreeing. The goal is to leave with two people who understand each other better and know what they can genuinely expect from each other. That is the difference between compliance or agreement and buy-in. Compliance says, fine, I'll do it, whatever. But buy-in says, I see why this matters, and I've found parts that matter to me too. And this is the part of it that I'm willing to carry. There's one important thing to clarify here. Buy-in doesn't always happen right away, and it doesn't mean one person has to give up their own needs to prove that they care. One conversation isn't going to solve every problem. Sometimes there are real reasons that we're hesitant about a partner's goal. Maybe we don't have the capacity to take on what they're asking, or maybe the change would require more time or money or energy than you or your family can realistically give right now. Maybe part of the idea doesn't feel right to us, or it conflicts with something that we believe is equally important. Okay, the purpose of this exercise isn't to talk ourselves out of those concerns, it's to help us separate, I don't care about this, from I care about this, but also I have questions or limits or needs that need to be part of this conversation. Those are two really different things. So let's say one partner wants to create a more consistent bedtime routine. By the end of the day, everyone is tired. Kids are melting down. The evening feels like chaos is erupting. A clear routine makes sense to them because the kids need more sleep. It feels important because they want evenings to end with more connection, less yelling, more time together. They're willing to start the routine earlier and take responsibility for getting the kids to bed. All right, so that's parent one. Now, the other parent can probably see value in that. They might agree that everyone needs more rest and they want bedtime to feel calmer too. But maybe they get home from work later in the evening, and those hours are some of the only time they have with their kids. A rigid bedtime routine might feel like one more thing that takes that connection time away. Now, that concern doesn't mean that they're not willing to support their partner. It means that they're also protecting something that matters to them. Now, as they work through this exercise, the second partner might say, the routine makes sense because what we're doing now isn't working. It feels good to imagine everyone ending the day in a different way, and I'm willing to put my phone away and help with bedtime as soon as I get home. But they might also add, I also need us to find a way for me to have meaningful time with the kids when I get home from work because I don't want the routine to make me feel like I've missed them entirely. Now, they're not arguing about whether bedtime should be structured or flexible. They're talking about how to create rest and protect connection. Maybe the answer is starting some parts of the routine before they get home from work, but maybe saving reading time together for the end. Or maybe it's consistent on school nights, but there's a little more flexibility on the weekends. They realize that their goal really isn't about enforcing a particular schedule, it's just making the evenings feel more peaceful. This is one of the things that I love about this head, heart, hands framework. It helps us get underneath the position that we're defending and see what each of us is actually trying to protect. And once we can see that, the conversation changes. We're no longer deciding which is right or which is more important. We're asking a much more useful question, and that is, how can we create a plan that holds space for what matters to both of us? And like I said at the beginning, even though I walked through this as an exercise for couples, it isn't limited to just one kind of relationship or even to relationships at all. You can use the head, heart, and hands anytime two people are trying to move towards something together. You can use it with a teenager who wants more freedom. So instead of immediately deciding whether they've earned freedom, you can each map out what you're hoping for. Maybe they want a later curfew because independence feels important. You might want more communication because knowing where they are helps you feel confident that they're safe. When you switch perspectives, your child has to consider what about your expectations make sense, why trust matters in the relationship, and what they're willing to do to build it. And you have to consider greater independence and why that might make sense and what it could mean for their growth and what flexibility as a parent you're willing to offer. Now, again, you may not land exactly where either of you started, but now the decision is being shaped by mutual understanding instead of this tug of war between freedom and control. You can also use this framework with a friend or a coworker or a family member or really anyone that you're trying to build something with. So when someone says this matters to me, head, heart, and hands helps us slow down long enough to understand what they're actually asking us to see. And I love this part of it. We can even use it with ourselves. Sometimes, and if you've ever made a New Year's resolution, this probably has happened to you. We try to make a change and assume that the problem, if we can't make that change, is that we're not disciplined enough. We want to wake up earlier or spend less time on our phone or respond more calmly or finally follow through on something that we've been putting off. We know we're supposed to do it, but we can't seem to make ourselves do it consistently. Before deciding that you need more willpower, it might be worth asking whether all three parts of you have actually bought into that goal. Does the change make sense in your head? Or are you doing it because someone else said you should? Does your heart feel connected to why it matters? Or does it feel like just another expectation you're trying to meet? And have your hands committed to something specific and realistic? Or are you hoping with just good intentions that somehow it will turn into action? We often create goals with the head and then expect the hands to carry them out without ever inviting the heart into the conversation or some other combination of the three. But information alone doesn't always move us to action. We need to understand not only what we want to do, but why it matters to us. And then we need to choose what we are genuinely willing to give to it. So even if your partner isn't ready to sit down and do this exercise with you, start with your own paper. You can map the change you want to make. You can look honestly at the logic, the meaning, and the cost. And you can ask yourself whether you are requesting someone else's buy in before you've really bought into it yourself. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in relationships is believing that caring about each other means we should automatically care about all of the same things, but that isn't how relationships work. We're going to notice different problems. We're going to feel urgency around different things. We're going to have different ideas about what our families need and how our shared values should show up in everyday life. The goal isn't to eliminate those differences. It's to learn how to honor what matters to each other without requiring one person to prove that their goal matters more. So, the next time you find yourself wondering, how do I get my partner on board with this? Try asking, how can we understand what each of us is really reaching for here? So take out two pieces of paper, draw a head, a heart, and a hand. Name what makes sense to you, what feels meaningful, and what each of you is honestly willing to contribute. You may not end the conversation in complete agreement. You might still need to negotiate details or change the plan or revisit the conversation when you have more capacity, but you will have the beginnings of a deeper conversation. You'll know each other better, and you'll understand that budget isn't only about money, and bedtime isn't about bedtime. The screen time isn't about screens. Each of those goals usually means something deeper: safety, connection, peace, trust, freedom, hope that life could feel more aligned with what matters to you. We don't have to care about every goal in exactly the same way our partner does. We don't even have to start from the same place, but we can look for the parts that make sense. We can find the parts that feel aligned, and we can decide what we are genuinely and honestly willing to do to help carry it out. That is what buy in really looks like. Not one person winning and the other person giving in, but two people saying, what matters to you matters to me too. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you'll try this exercise. It's such an easy way to engage in those deeper and more thoughtful conversations, and I know that it works. I would love it so much if you would take a moment and leave a rating or a review for the podcast. Every time an episode is shared, it makes it that much easier for our community here to grow. I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you again next time, where we'll continue to explore the art and science of parenting and put your parenting to the test. Take care, everyone.